And now they weren't just threatening me. They were making a promise. Before I could even gather my thoughts, my phone rang. It was Keller, and his voice was sharp. "Luke, listen carefully. We just got confirmation from Washington." I clenched the phone tighter. "What is it?" "Harmony Front Holdings isn't just a paper company. It's part of a foreign-backed land acquisition network. They've pulled this stunt in at least 4 other states." I leaned against the porch railing, staring into the painted trees. "And Karen?" I asked. "She was on their payroll," Keller said grimly, "but she's vanished. We went to her place this morning. The house is empty. No signs of a struggle, but her phone's dead. No activity in the last 18 hours. I exhaled slowly. "So they're scrubbing their tracks." "Exactly," he replied. I stared into the dark woods, heart pounding. We were in deeper than I ever imagined, and they were just getting started. But so were we. The next morning, Keller made the call that changed everything. He activated the full team. No more trainees, no more prep drills. This time, the real unit was coming in, just before sunrise. The sound of tires crunching on gravel woke me. I stepped onto the porch and watched as 6 unmarked black SUVs crept up the trail. Their headlights were off. They moved like predators through the trees. They parked in formation around the cabin. Doors opened in near-perfect unison, and out stepped agents in full tactical gear. These weren't students. They were the real thing. Leading them was Special Agent Monroe, a seasoned field commander in her 40s with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. She walked up to the porch with calm authority and extended her hand. Her grip was solid. Her tone was firm. "We're securing the perimeter. As of now, this property is under federal surveillance and protection." I didn't argue. I knew her reputation. I'd seen her work during a trafficking operation up in Seattle years ago. She was ruthless with facts, clinical in execution, and had no tolerance for political games. "You've drawn attention, Mr. Mason," she said bluntly, "and we don't believe they're just trying to rattle your nerves anymore." She handed me a folder. Inside were satellite images of plots of land surrounding the lake, all tied back to Harmony Front Holdings. But it was the final page that chilled me to the bone. A blueprint. It showed a full resort, a casino, golf course, executive villas, an entire complex designed to sit right on top of our homes. My land, Rachel's land, O'Neill's, dozens of families, all targeted. They weren't just trying to intimidate us. They were planning to erase us. Monroe's expression hardened. "This plan has been in motion for years," she said, "and they're not going to stop unless someone makes them. Phony hope pressure, shady buyout offers, subtle threats. It was all part of their playbook. They'd intimidate people into selling cheap, then flip the land for an enormous profit. And Golden Pine Lake, that was their final prize." I slammed the folder shut. "They picked the wrong mountain." Monroe gave a faint smirk. "That's why we're here." By midday, surveillance drones buzzed through the treetops. Hidden trail cameras were mounted along paths, and the FBI converted the old bunkhouse I'd restored into a mobile command post. It felt surreal, and my peaceful haven was now a federal staging ground. But it wasn't fear I felt. It was resolve. Still, I couldn't shake the worry for everyone else. I got in my truck and drove over to check on Rachel. She was rattled but focused, knee-deep in gathering old land deeds, maps, anything to establish the original boundaries. Diego was with her in the church hall's back room, scanning papers with a portable rig. 2 off-duty deputies guarded the entrance. The town was finally stirring. What had started as whispers was now open conversation. Neighbors who'd kept quiet were starting to organize, knock on doors, share stories. But the other side hadn't gone quiet. Just before 10 that night, my phone lit up. An alert from the drone network: movement on the North Trail. I pulled up the live feed and froze. 3 figures in black masks moved swiftly through the woods. Their steps were silent, their path direct. This wasn't some trespassing teen group. These were trained. I grabbed the radio. "Monroe North Trail, fast movers, masked, not hunters." Her reply came instantly. "Stay put, lights out, we're on it." Within seconds, her team was already moving, as silent silhouettes disappearing into the trees like smoke. I stood by the window, heart pounding, eyes on the tree line. Then, 3 sharp pops rang out in the distance, and not gunshots, flash bangs. A minute passed, then another. Then Keller's voice came over the radio. 3 suspects. 2 in custody. 1 fled. They were carrying incendiaries. My stomach turned. Incendiaries. They weren't just here to frighten anymore. They were planning to burn something down. 15 minutes later, Keller and Monroe returned with 2 of the masked men in cuffs. Neither said a word. One had a bottle of burn gel in his backpack, the other carried a key fob for the HOA Karen's, most likely stolen or passed off before she vanished. They were heading for the shed. Monroe said, "We think they intended to destroy the documents you've been collecting. They're in a fireproof box," I said, "hidden beneath the floorboards." She nodded. Smart. The third man had escaped, but not cleanly. The drones were tracking his heat signature, and the local police were setting up checkpoints. We had the upper hand for now, but I knew this wasn't over. They'd be back, and next time, they'd go bigger. That next push came early the following morning, at exactly 7:15. As I sipped bitter coffee on the porch, a silver BMW eased to a stop outside the front gate. A man stepped out, a clean-cut, smooth-shaven, wearing a tailored gray suit and mirrored sunglasses. He moved slowly, deliberately, with his hands visibly non-threatening, but rehearsed. "Mr. Mason," he called out calmly. I didn't reply, just watched. "I represent the investors behind Harmony Front Holdings," he said, his tone polished and slick. "They've authorized me to make you a final offer, double market value, full cash, no press, no courts. You walk away today." I rose slowly, stepped off the porch, and walked until I was standing right in front of him. "Double the market rate for land you tried to torch last night?" I asked, low and quiet. He didn't blink, just smiled, a cold, practiced smile. "The land itself doesn't matter," he said. "It's about the access." "Access to what?" I asked. "The lake," he replied, and that smile deepened. That's when it clicked. There was something under the lake, or around it, something valuable, and they needed it secured before anyone else uncovered it. I held his gaze for a long moment, then gave him one word: number. He didn't argue, just handed me a business card and turned to leave. "Think it over," he said. "You don't want to be here when the next phase begins." He drove away, calm as ever, like he hadn't just issued a threat in broad daylight. 2 hours later, we discovered exactly what they meant by the next step. Across the lake, a plume of smoke began to rise. Rachel's cabin was on fire. They'd struck while the FBI's focus was on me. We were there within minutes. Monroe's team, the sheriff, even the town's old volunteer fire truck. Together, they managed to stop the flames from spreading. Thankfully, no one was hurt. Rachel had been in town when it started, but the message was unmistakable. This was a systematic takedown, one cabin at a time, until every last one of us either surrendered or retaliated. Even after the flames were out, the stench of scorched wood clung to my jacket. Rachel's home was in ruins. Fire had ripped through the roof and walls like it had a vendetta. The firefighters managed to save the structure from collapsing completely, but inside was a wreck, walls stained black, windows shattered, family photos reduced to ash. She stood there, paralyzed by grief, barely breathing. I stood beside her, fists clenched, silently wishing I could throw a mountain between her and what had just happened. "This is war," she whispered. I nodded. They were trying to make an example out of her. Monroe and her agents were already combing the area, moving with precision and documenting ignition points, collecting samples, pulling drone footage synced to the exact moment the smoke alarm had gone off. "They used an accelerant," Keller confirmed, crouched near the charred window frame. "Same fire gel we found in the gear near your place." Rachel didn't cry. She didn't speak again. She just turned away and walked toward her Jeep. "You'll need a place to stay," I said. She glanced back. "I'm not leaving the lake." That's when it hit me, something in all of us had shifted. They thought they could chase us off. Instead, they were rooting us deeper. Back at my cabin, the FBI was scaling up. Reinforcements arrived. Snipers posted themselves in the trees. Drones circled overhead on a tight rotation. It looked like a film set, only it wasn't. That evening, I sat down with Monroe privately. "There's something you're not telling me," I said. She hesitated, then finally spoke. "This morning, we received a sealed report from the Federal Land Bureau." She took a breath. "There are mineral deposits beneath the lake, the kind that attract international interest." I blinked. "Gold?" "More valuable, she said. Rare earth metals, lithium, cobalt, enough to bring in contractors from around the globe. And suddenly everything made sense. The aggressive property acquisitions, the sudden push from the HOA Karen's strange obsession with keeping the neighborhood a harmonious. This wasn't about land anymore, it was about extraction. They want to strip mine the lake, I said. They'll call it something friendlier, Monroe replied. A hydrology assessment, a green energy test site. But EA said that's the goal, and they can't move forward until the locals are gone. That night, the town gathered. The church hall overflowed as shoulder-to-shoulder fishermen, teachers, young families, people who'd called this place home for generations. I stepped forward and told them everything. What lay beneath the water, what happened to Karen, why the cabins were burning, and what would happen if we did nothing. We either vanish, I said, or we fight for the land that raised us. No one clapped. The room was dead silent. Then old Mr. O'Neill rose, cane in hand, and slammed it on the floor. Let him come, he said. We've lived through storms, blackouts, and crooked mayors. We'll survive this too. Cheers finally broke out. The town had decided it wasn't going down without a fight. But Harmony Front wasn't finished. The next morning brought something even worse. Every road leading in or out of Golden Pine was barricaded. Massive construction trucks, private security in matching uniforms, orange detour signs citing government access only. We'd been sealed in. I stood at the main gate, staring at guards who said nothing. No badges, no logos, just sunglasses, clipboards, and silence. Monroe pulled up beside me in an unmarked SUV. We're contacting DC, she said. This isn't just a land dispute anymore. This is a corporate siege disguised as red tape. It was Rachel who spotted the next clue. Our boat hit the dock just as the fourth man, masked like the others, climbed into a small, camouflaged boat hidden beneath the lakeside brush. He fired up the engine. Stop, or we'll shoot, Monroe called, rifle raised. But he didn't stop. The boat tore across the lake, a razor through moonlit water. Keller pulled a device from his pocket, one of the drone remotes. Let's see how he likes being the one hunted, he said. The drone lifted into the air, silent, fast, locked on. Within seconds, the drone was transmitting live thermal footage to a tablet screen. The man in the boat was alone, steering toward the far side of the lake, right where the shoreline narrowed near the private airstrip. He's trying to flee, Monroe said. Or link up with someone, I responded. We forwarded the live feed to DC. Monroe requested aerial surveillance while Keller coordinated with the sheriff to shut down access roads around the airfield. Then something unexpected happened. The boat abruptly stopped, floating dead center on the lake. No lights, no motion, just drifting in place. What's he doing? Rachel whispered. Stalling, Keller muttered. Or transmitting, I added. He's not running, he's buying time. Monroe looked at me sharply. You said you had backup files? I nodded. In the fireproof case. They didn't find it. We rushed back to my cabin. I pulled up the hidden floorboard under the bedroom and retrieved the heavy metal box. Inside were duplicate copies of everything. Land deeds, satellite scans, drone videos, home meeting transcripts, and even Karen's walkie-talkie recordings. I can get this into the federal cloud in minutes, Monroe said, flipping open her laptop. But the moment she tried to connect, everything went dark. No Wi-Fi, hotspot disabled, even the satellite uplink was scrambled. What now? Rachel asked, tension creeping into her voice. They're jamming our signal, Keller said grimly. Whoever's behind this, they're watching us, every move. That left us with one last option of the broadcast we had originally planned for Sunday. I glanced at the solar-powered mobile unit we'd hidden in the truck bed. Still charged, still working. We do it tonight, I said, not later. Now, within 30 minutes, the entire town had gathered at the lakefront, illuminated by lanterns and flashlights. Rachel hooked the unit to the projector. Monroe's agents secured the encrypted stream. Then I stepped in front of the camera. The night was quiet. My voice wavered slightly as I began. My name is Luke Mason. I'm a retired federal agent, and I live here on Golden Pine Lake. I'm speaking to you because this town is under siege. I told the world everything. The fake home expansion, the shell companies, the arson attempts, the armed break-ins, the hidden minerals, the takeover. We played Karen's audio logs, showed the drone footage of the boat still adrift, displayed the mineral reports. And I ended with this: "We're not going anywhere, we are not for sale, and we will not be erased." Over 200,000 people tuned in live. Within an hour, hashtags were trending: #Save Golden Pine, #HOA Exposed, #Karen cover-up. Calls began flooding into local law enforcement. Reporters started showing up. Federal agencies reopened investigations. And the man in the boat? He suddenly leapt into the water and vanished beneath the dark surface. By morning, we had a federal warrant to investigate Harmony Front's entire operation. That same day, Monroe received word from Washington Karen had been located. She was hiding in a high-rise condo downtown, protected by private security and ready to flee the country. They caught her at the airport. No sunglasses, no pastel blazer, just handcuffs and silence. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The truth was deafening. Within a week, Harmony Front Holdings collapsed. Their bank accounts were frozen, building permits revoked. The real puppet masters, names no one in town had ever heard of, started turning on each other to save themselves. Golden Pine was safe. Neighbors came together to rebuild Rachel's cabana. Every wall, every photo frame. Donations poured in from strangers who had seen the live stream and wanted to help. As for Diego, he got a scholarship offer from a youth tech academy in D.C. Someone important saw the video of him scanning and organizing documents and decided his bravery deserved something more. And me, I'm still here, on the porch, coffee in hand. The woods are quiet again, not because danger disappeared but because we stood up to it, together. And in that quiet, I learned something. Sometimes the strongest defense isn't a fence or a firearm, it's the truth, and the guts to speak it when everyone else tells you to stay silent. So if you've got your own HOA Karen trying to muscle you off your land, don't step aside, because the moment you do, they win. But if you stand your ground, you might just discover a broken bar. You're not standing alone. Drop your weapons, hands where we can see them. The commands cut through the forest like thunder, so sharp and loud that even the birds went silent. In an instant, the camouflaged hunter stood frozen in place, rifles still raised halfway. What they didn't know, and what Karen, queen of the hoe, clearly hadn't realized, was that my lake cabin wasn't abandoned. Not even close. That weekend, the woods surrounding the cabin were full of life. 30 FBI trainees, to be exact, running through an advanced wilderness survival exercise. Now they were materializing from the trees like shadows, weapons drawn and eyes locked on the trespassers Karen had sent in. One of the camo-clad men tried to talk. "We were told this place was a broken bar." "Then you're trespassing on federal land," Agent Keller barked, stepping forward and flashing his badge clipped to his tactical vest. "You've got 5 seconds to tell us who sent you." And I wouldn't recommend lying. The silence that followed was dense and heavy. The oldest hunter looked like all the blood had drained from his face. They exchanged confused, nervous glances. Karen's name hadn't been mentioned yet, but it was only a matter of time, and when it did come up, things were going to change fast. I stood on the cabin porch, arms crossed, not afraid, just simmering with quiet rage. I had warned Karen too many times. I told her to stop pretending the lake belonged to her and her little hoe clique, but sending armed men while families were camping nearby, that crossed a line you don't come back from. Now, she was about to learn a lesson she never saw coming. But before I tell you what happened next, let me take you back to how it all began, because this story didn't start with rifles and agents. It started with a simple dream. And a sign. Quick favor, drop a comment telling me where you are watching this from. I'm curious how far this lake cabin story has traveled. If you've ever dealt with someone trying to push you off your own land, you're going to want to hear this. My name is Luke Mason. I'm 52, retired from active duty with the FBI. These days, I spend my time restoring old cabins, fishing, and teaching self-defense to kids in my area. I bought the cabin by Golden Pine Lake 5 years ago. It's a peaceful place, tall trees, clean water, and mostly good neighbors. The cabin had belonged to an older couple who couldn't maintain it anymore. I made a fair offer, and they were happy to see it go to someone who'd take care of it. That's all I ever wanted, a peace, a project to focus on, a place to exhale after 2 decades chasing ghosts of cartel bosses, fraudsters, and worse. But peace doesn't last long when you've got an HOA Karen in your orbit. Her real name is Glenda Whitmore. She's probably in her late 50s, always dressed in pastel blazers, oversized sunglasses, and a blonde bun that could cut glass. She lives just up the hill in a gated community called Lakeside Harmony. Their HOA has a reputation for controlling everything: the mailbox designs, patio furniture, even what flowers you're allowed to plant. My cabin, just outside their jurisdiction, barely. And that's always bothered her. From the moment I started repairs, she acted like I owed her reports. This cabin impacts our neighborhood's aesthetic, she told me one day, standing uninvited by my ladder as I replaced shingles. Your firewood is visible from the trail. I reminded her politely that my land was private. I even offered her coffee that day. I believe in starting with kindness, give people the chance to be reasonable. But she wasn't interested in reason. She wanted control. At first, it was just annoying. Complaints about the chainsaw being too loud at noon. Passive-aggressive remarks about friends I had over for cookouts. Then came the notes. Hand-delivered messages. Not even official whole letters, just demands. Please remove visible equipment. No RVs parked longer than 12 hours. Limit gatherings to 8 people or fewer. I ignored them, nicely. I even returned one with a red smiley face drawn on it, thinking maybe she'd find it funny. She didn't. Then things escalated. One morning, I found a private HOA property and no trespassing sign nailed into a tree next to my driveway. Big bold letters, her HOA's logo stamped at the bottom. I didn't lose my temper. I calmly took it down and left it on her porch with a sticky note. Nice try, but this tree's mine, so is the land. You'd think that would have been the end of it. But people like Karen, they don't stop. They don't reflect. They double down. I didn't even know about the hunters until the week before the survival training. One of my students, Diego, from my self-defense class, ran up to me after a morning hike, out of breath. "Mr. Mason," he said, "there were guys with guns near your place yesterday." Real guns. I heard one say something about clearing it for the HOA. I told Diego I'd take care of it. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't just some rumor. This was a warning. I made a call to an old friend, Keller, who now runs the regional FBI training academy. We had history. He owed me a few favors. I offered him something in return, a quiet, remote spot where his trainees could run advanced survival drills. He agreed without hesitation. It would be good training for them in real-world scenarios, unpredictable terrain, potential civilian involvement. I didn't mention Karen. I didn't want to sound petty. I just said the woods were deep, peaceful, and full of surprises. He said they'd arrive Friday. I prepped the place, stocked the pantry, checked the gear, cleaned out the bunkhouse, got everything ready. Friday came. Keller showed up with 30 trainees, sharp, serious, focused. Half of them were brand new. The others were already halfway through the program. 2 years of intense mental and physical training had prepared them for moments just like this. The recruits were camped about a quarter-mile into the forest, but I had a direct radio line to them just in case. And it turned out that precaution would pay off. Just after midnight on Sunday, a motion alert went off along the East Trail. 5 figures, one with a scoped rifle slung over his shoulder. They moved with caution and purpose, like men who had done this before, but they weren't nearly as stealthy as they thought. My thermal cameras tracked every step. I didn't call the sheriff. I didn't bother with 911. Instead, I picked up my secured radio and whispered just 2 words: "It's time." Within minutes, the forest rustled to life. Soft shifts in the underbrush, quiet bootfalls, trainees emerging from the dark like phantoms. They moved in flawless formation, surrounding the intruders using the survival drills they'd been sharpening all weekend. I stood on my porch, calm and alert, waiting for the moment. And then, it happened. "Drop your weapons, hands in the air," just like I told you. But what came next, you might not believe it. Once the trainees had the men cornered and started questioning them, one of the camo-wearing strangers looked up and said something that nearly made my blood boil. "We were told this cabin was a threat to the neighborhood. We're just here to scare off squatters." That's when I stepped forward. "Then maybe you can explain who exactly gave you that mission." Before the man could answer, a crack echoed from the woods. A 6th person emerged from the tree, not carrying a rifle, but gripping a walkie-talkie. And what came through that walkie-talkie changed everything. There was a burst of static, then a sharp voice, unmistakable. "Are they gone yet? I want that cabin cleared out before sunrise. And make sure no one sees you. This is HOA business, understood?" Everyone froze. Agent Keller's gaze snapped to the man with the walkie like a hawk spotting a mouse. The kid, he couldn't have been older than mid-20s, looked like he just swallowed a grenade. Clearly, he hadn't expected a voice to respond on the open channel. He didn't even have time to shut it off before it buzzed again. Louder this time. "Report back, Greg." "Don't make me come down there myself." Keller calmly stepped forward, took the walkie-talkie from the trembling man's hand, and pressed the talk button. His voice was quiet but sharp as glass. "This is Agent Keller with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need the name of whoever sent you right now." Dead silence followed, then a rustle. Click. The signal went dead. I didn't need to guess. Karen Whitmore. She had gone too far this time, sent armed men onto my property, thinking she could intimidate me into giving up the cabin or worse, assuming I wouldn't be there at all. But instead of some backwoods scare tactic, her plan triggered a full tactical response. 30 federal trainees, all watching, recording, surrounding her little hired crew. And the second that voice on the radio said "ho," the air changed. One of the men dropped to his knees. "We didn't know," he muttered. "She said squatters were taking over, said there'd be a payout to just scare tactics. We weren't supposed to shoot anyone." The others looked just as shaken. They were carrying rifles. Sure, yeah, but these weren't hardened criminals. They were pawns in someone else's reckless plan. Keller turned to me. "You recognize that voice?" I nodded. "Karen Whitmore, president of the Lakeside Harmony HOA." Keller didn't say anything right away. He let the weight of the moment settle before he lifted his radio. "Secure them. No cuffs yet, but eyes on. We'll need statements." Then he turned to me. "Mason, you want to press charges?" "Trespassing, armed entry, intimidation?" I looked at them, trembling hands, avoiding eye contact. "Not yet," I said, "but I want the full story, and I want her to know I'm not afraid." "No one was arrested at night." "Not immediately." Keller confiscated their weapons, took down names, and made it clear this was far from over. It became obvious they'd been manipulated. Karen had told them the cabin was overrun by criminals, that drugs might be involved, a complete fabrication. But what burned the most, she thought she could get away with it. The next morning, I didn't take my truck into town. I walked. I wanted people to see I was still here. I wanted the ground beneath my feet and the eyes of my neighbors on me. Golden Pine is a quiet place. One grocery store, a diner, and a sheriff's station that still flew a faded American flag from decades past. I stepped into Millie's Cafe _copyright and ordered my usual black coffee. Millie, sweet and silver-haired, running the place since before I moved in, looked me over with concern. "You okay, Luke?" "I am," I said. "Karen isn't." Her eyebrows shot up. "Oh Lord, what did she do now?" "She sent armed men onto my land last night." The diner went silent. Even the coffee machine seemed to hush. "You call the sheriff?" she asked, stunned. I took a slow sip. "Didn't have to," I said. "FBI was already waiting." "You serious?" Millie asked. 30 federal trainees, all armed, all trained, all watching." Someone behind me let out a low whistle. I didn't go into the details, and not yet. I needed time to think, to prepare, because if I knew Karina, and unfortunately, Idita, she was already working on her next story, something dramatic, something where she was the helpless victim, and I wasn't wrong. By the time I returned to the cabin, 2 new notes were pinned to my front gate. The first was typed in bold red font, laminated like it belonged in a business office. "This property is in violation of Community Safety Code 912. All hazardous activity must stop immediately. HOA President Glenda Whitmore." The second was handwritten, rushed, and messy. "You shouldn't have involved the FBI. You're putting us all in danger. This is your final warning." I stood there, reading both notes, shaking my head. Karen had nerve. I'd give her that. Twisted, delusional nerve. I didn't waste any time, walked straight to my storage shed, moved a rack of tools aside, and opened the steel case tucked behind it. Inside was an old binder in my field file. I hadn't opened it in years. It held records, clippings, documentation, all the things I kept for one reason only: leverage. I flipped through until I found Ida. Lakeside Harmonyland Deed Dispute, 1989. When the lake was originally parceled out, Karen's development tried to claim the land around my cabin, but the original deed was crystal clear. My lot was separate, privately owned, and never under HOA control. They had no authority here. Never did. They just acted like they did. I made copies, stuffed them into envelopes, and mailed one to every single member of her HOA board. No explanation, just one sentence: "You've been misled. Ask Karen to show you the original deed." But that wasn't the end. Not even close. That evening, just as the sun dipped below the trees, I sat on my porch with a mug of hot cocoa and a clean conscience. And then, motion alerts flared again. 6 figures this time. No rifles, just phones. They were snapping pictures of my cabin, pointing, whispering. And among them, Karen. There she stood in a peach-colored suit, tapping her phone like she was filing another complaint. But this time, she wasn't alone as she brought back up, and they were standing dangerously close to my shed. That's when I heard Ida. A crash, shattering glass, then a scream. We'll pause here because what I saw next wasn't Karen. It was someone else, someone I never expected to see again. I rushed to the side of the cabin, cocoa forgotten, spilling across the porch. My heart pounded with each step. The scream had come from a woman, high-pitched, panicked. Not Karen. By the shed, where the window was now broken, I found her crouched behind a stack of firewood, trembling, palms cut and bleeding. Rachel Davis. She used to work down at the town clerk's office, a kind woman in her early 40s, short curly brown hair, gentle green eyes. The last person I'd expect to be anywhere near Karen Circusa, especially not at my place. Not now. "Rachel," I said, stunned. "What the hell are you doing here?" She looked up, tears streaking her cheeks, her voice shaking. "I didn't know they were going to break in. I thought we were just taking pictures for the HOA report." I helped her up and brought her inside. Her palm was bleeding pretty badly. I grabbed the first aid kit from the hallway. I always kept it stocked for the survival courses. "Who's a we?" I asked, gently cleaning the wound. "Karen said she had permission to inspect your property," Rachel replied. "She told the board you were building unauthorized structures and hiding military equipment." I raised an eyebrow. "Military equipment?" "She claimed you were hosting rogue paramilitary groups. Said we needed proof to report it to the county." I almost laughed, but Rachel's face stopped me. She wasn't lying. She was scared, just like the hunters. Rachel had been used, a pawn in Karen's ongoing game of overreaching manipulation. She never mentioned anything about FBI agents. Rachel whispered, "She told us the cabins were empty again, that it was dangerous." "I shouldn't have come." I nodded. "You weren't trying to break in?" "No," she said quickly. "I tripped over something in the dark, hit the glass by accident." Just then, the front door opened. Agent Keller stepped in, expression sharp. "Luke," he said, "we've got company." 3 vehicles just pulled up at the end of your trail. I walked with him to the porch. The light was gone now. The forest around us loomed in tall, dark silhouettes. Headlights flickered between the trees. SUVs. One rolled to a stop just outside the gate. Out stepped Sheriff Dean Callahan, and right beside him, Karen Whitmore. She looked like she was arriving at a charity gala. Peach blazer, beige heels, giant sunglasses. Despite the fact that it was well past sundown, the sheriff lifted a hand. "Evening, Luke." "Evening, Dean," I replied coolly. "You dropping by for cocoa?" He gave a nervous chuckle, but his eyes were already on the shattered window and on Rachel, who was now seated inside, her hand wrapped in gauze and her face pale. Karen stepped forward, voice sugary and loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm here to officially report Mr. Mason for harboring unauthorized federal agents and endangering our community's safety." And that's when Agent Keller stepped forward. Agent Keller stepped up beside me, calm as ever, with that steady, authoritative tone only the FBI could perfect. "Ma'am," he said, "those individuals are part of a federally approved survival training program, fully documented, fully authorized, and this property is private land." Karen didn't flinch. Her smile stayed painted on. "Too perfect, too rehearsed." "That's not what my records show," she replied sweetly. "According to our HOA perimeter map, This cabin falls within the Lakeside Harmony Oversight Zone. That gives me every right to conduct inspections for safety violations. I raised my phone. Funny, I said, turning the screen toward Sheriff Callahan, because this deed right here says otherwise. The sheriff stepped closer and squinted at the photo I'd pulled up at the 1989 original land deed. He let out a tired sigh. I remember this, he muttered. That boundary's been the same since the 80s. Karen's jaw tightened. That's outdated. The HOA updated our zoning maps last spring. Keller's brow furrowed. Ma'am, are you suggesting that your HOA's personal map overrides historical land records and federal documentation? Karen tried to recover. We were only trying to keep the neighborhood safe. There were reports of armed men doing tactical drills. People were alarmed. I took a quiet step toward her. You mean the same armed men your walkie-talkie instructed to clear the cabin before sunrise? She froze. I continued, voice low but steady. We have your voice. The entire radio transmission was recorded. The sheriff's hand moved to his belt. Karen blinked rapidly, like she was trying to piece together a life fast enough to get ahead of it. There must be a misunderstanding, she stammered, but Rachel stepped forward behind me, calm but firm. No, there isn't. She looked right at Karen. You lied to all of us. You said we were helping the neighborhood. You never mentioned armed hunters. You didn't say a word about the FBI. The glare Karen shot her could have cracked stone, but it was too late for damage control. Sheriff Callahan let out a heavy breath. I think it's time we took a little drive down to the station, Glenda. You've got some explaining to do. Karen didn't argue, not because she was innocent, but because she still thought she could talk her way out of it. That was her game, always had been. As she walked back to the car with the sheriff, I stood on the porch beside Keller, watching her silhouette disappear into the trees. For a moment, I thought it might finally be over, but I was wrong. The next morning, before the sun even broke fully over the horizon, my phone rang. It was Diego, one of the teens from my self-defense class. His voice was shaking. Mr. Mason, he said, I think someone's watching me. I saw a man outside my house early this morning. Same guy from the woods. I don't think he saw me, but he was definitely looking for you. My gut twisted. I told Diego everything. I thought this mess ended with Karen's walk of shame, but it was clear now Karen hadn't been working alone, and whoever was backing her wasn't done yet. They weren't coming with rifles anymore. Now, they were coming with something colder, something more calculated. I didn't hesitate. As soon as Diego hung up, I grabbed my keys, strapped my old sidearm to my hip not to use it, just to remind them I coulda, and drove straight into town. Diego lived with his grandmother in a quiet cul-de-sac near the old fire tower. Humble folks. Honest people, the kind Karen's home never even acknowledged because they didn't have gates or manicured lawns. I parked 2 houses down and approached slowly, not wanting to alarm anyone. Diego pulled back the curtain before I even reached the door. He opened it quietly, fear etched into every line of his young face. The guy came back, he whispered. Just 5 minutes ago. He had a hoodie on, but I recognized him. He was one of the ones you and the FBI stopped. Did he say anything? I asked. Number. He just stood across the street near the fence, pretending to scroll on his phone. Then he left. I stepped out onto the porch and scanned the neighborhood. Nothing looked unusual, but that didn't mean a thing. This wasn't random anymore. Diego, I said gently, stay inside today, stick with your grandma, lock the doors, and if you see that man again, call me or Agent Keller immediately. Got it? He nodded, eyes wide. I knew he wanted to ask more, but there were things I couldn't tell him yet, things I was still figuring out myself. Back at the cabin, I found Keller reviewing security footage from the night before. When I told him about the man near Diego's house, he didn't look surprised. We had a feeling, he said quietly. Karen wasn't smart enough to pull all this off by herself. She's just the front. My stomach dropped. You think someone's backing her? I asked. Not just backing her, Keller replied. Using her. Someone's testing how far they can push before someone pushes back. That hit harder than I expected. Karen had always been obsessive, power-hungry, but this smelled like something more dangerous, something organized. Do we have any names? I asked. He nodded slowly. We're closing in. one of the hunters of the youngest Tonia. We checked his bank records. He recently got a deposit from a shell corporation. No business history. Registered across 3 states. What's the name of the company? Keller turned the laptop screen toward me. Harmony Front Holdings. I stared. Harmony, I said aloud. He nodded. Same as Karen's neighborhood. Might be a coincidence, yeah, but I doubt it. We stood in silence for a moment. Then I said what we were both thinking. This wasn't about my cabin, was it? No, Keller said grimly. I think they want this land. All of it. Maybe for development. Maybe to hide something. But whatever it is, you're standing in their way. And in that moment, everything fell into place. Karen accusing me of building military structures. Her claiming I was on whole land. The armed men. The surveillance. The intimidation. This wasn't just about noise complaints or firewood. This was about power, territory, control. And now, someone in the shadows had made me their problem. The contractors weren't local. They were brought in from out of town, and now with shell companies involved. It was clear someone wanted this land badly. Karen's HOA authority had just been a convenient mask. The following day, I did something I usually avoided. I called a community meeting. I wasn't one to dip into town politics, but this was different. People needed to know. We gathered in the church hall. It filled quickly. Neighbors from all around the lake came, some from town, a few from surrounding areas, and even a handful of former members of Karen's HOA board. I stood in front of them with a projector and a folder stuffed with evidence. One by one, I laid it out: the legitimate property lines, surveillance footage, the audio clip of Karen issuing orders through the walkie-talkie, and finally, the smoking gun of the details on the shell corporation. That's when the murmurs started. Harmony Front? Someone said. They tried to buy my land last year. They told me my dock wasn't up to code. Another added, but I've had that dock since the late 90s. Then Mr. O'Neill stood up, retired plumber, lived just a few cabins down from mine. His hands were trembling. They approached me too, he said. Tried to buy me out quietly. When I said no, my dock was trashed a week later. I thought it was just local kids. This was no longer just my fight. It was everyone's. I don't know exactly who they are yet, I told the room, but they're hiding behind phony HOA claims, forged documents, and staged meetings. And they're trying to take this land from all of us. Rachel stood beside me, her bandaged hand still healing. I used to work in the county clerk's office, she said. About 2 years ago, someone came in asking about amending land deeds, said it was to align with new HOA zoning boundaries. I didn't think much of it then, but now I think they were laying groundwork. The hall fell into silence. Then Diego's grandmother stood. She rarely spoke, but when she did, everyone listened. It's time we stop being afraid of men in suits waving legal papers, she said calmly. If we don't stand together, they'll pick us off one by one. That night, I walked home with something burning in my chest, not fear, not anger, but clarity. We were finally fighting back, but when I returned to the cabin, my heart sank. Every one of my cameras had been disabled, each lens smeared with black paint, and across the front door, scrawled in thick red spray paint, were 3 words: Final Notice, Mason. I scanned the area and no alerts from the motion sensors, no footage from the hidden trail cam deep in the woods. Whoever did this, they were professionals. They knew exactly where the blind spots were.